Hi, I'm here today with Matt Martin, Experience Architect at Ithaca. We're going to talk about user experience and the user experience field with a focus on user experience design and what designers contribute to the field of user experience. So welcome and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing at Ithaca right now.
So I work on a team with software engineers, quality assurance engineers, a product manager, and a visual designer, and then myself. And what I try to do is set up enough strategy and enough design work collaboratively with my team to kind of get that work ready for development. So I would say I spend half of my days in meetings and half of my days doing design. And it's very collaborative. So there's going to be some times where I'm heads down work, doing some designs or doing some research. But then there'll be a lot of times where I'm brainstorming strategy with my product manager, or working with a user researcher to make sure that we're going to set up the right type of user testing. And then my visual designer, who I collaborate a lot with, is in New York. So we'll sometimes do some screen sharing where we'll collaborate on a design, or I'll just start sketching on a whiteboard and I'll take pictures of it and send it to her and say, okay, I just created this really quickly. Can you, bring back something to me? And then we'll kind of collaborate that way. So it's like we have these pods of teams that, like I said, are blended, and then some, other times I'll meet with the whole UX department with other designers to find out, hey, what are you working on and how is it going to influence what I'm doing? Sometimes I'm doing parts of the site or some of our products that do touch each other, and sometimes I'm kind of on my own, or it's a product that's not touching other things. So.
Could you give us an example of maybe a project that you've worked on and kind of take us through, how it started and how it progressed through the different stages until it became, however it ended up?
Okay. So we needed to do a redesign of the strategy and research arm of Ithaca. So they had a website that was aging, but not only that, their business model and some of their programs had changed. So we needed to do a refresh on the website to kind of represent that new program that they were trying to focus on, and also to do a better job of having that website reflect their business objectives. So,
could you maybe just say real quick what the strategy and research?
Yes.
The strategy and research. Well, who are the users and what are they trying to do with this website?
So primarily, what the strategy and research arm does is they work with libraries and higher education, and they deal with administrators and librarians to basically get technology and libraries kind of like ready for the future.
Okay.
How does technology influence that? And one of their programs that they started to promote and that started new just last year is called Educational Transformation, which is all about how is education being transformed and how can institutions go along with it. So they do a lot of consulting.
Okay.
They write a lot of papers, case studies, reports, issue briefs, and librarians try to get all of that research because they give it away for free.
Okay.
In the hopes to sell some of their products. They do surveys, they do on-site consulting and stuff like that.
I see.
So what was happening was the website was had a lot of information there and it had all the reports, but it wasn't as easy to go from one report to another, and there wasn't really a way for the products and the reports to kind of intermingle.
Okay.
And so it was our goal to figure out, okay, where is the business going? How is the site working and not working? And how can we make it work better? Mm-hmm. So what I did was I interviewed all the directors and all the program directors and the marketing directors there at S&R, was what it's called.
Okay.
Ithaca S&R.
Okay.
Strategy and research. And I did that with a user researcher, my product manager, and an engineer. Mm-hmm. So while we were doing that, we were taking notes and trying to figure out, okay, so this is how they look at their business, this is how they look at their users. So we had a pretty good idea of what to do next. And next was, let's find out what we're dealing with. I did a content inventory of the whole site. We started to look at the analytics of the site to find out how traffic was getting there and what was happening while they were there and where the users were leaving. Mm-hmm. Next, I did a comparative analysis, so I'm looking at all the different competition that they have throughout the landscape, inside their industry and outside their industry, just to see how it happens, like how the branding happens, how the interaction design works, so what people are going to expect when they go to the site, so that we're not doing anything that's too different or something that we can make sure it falls in people's expectations when visiting the site. So once we did all that, and kind of concurrently, we had the developers starting working on a framework. So me and the designer could start thinking ahead, and we knew that we were going to have to feed the developers, you know, the real full site. But in the meantime, we wanted to have them just develop a slice of the site. So a working version of every single section, but it didn't go deep. Okay. It was just one kind of like layer.
So this would be software, and you're thinking of just having the different components kind of in place so that as you're doing the design, you could actually have a framework to sort of test things out and see how it'll work.
Exactly. That way there was a foundation there. We could see if things were working, and we could find out early on that, hey, this really doesn't work. But what we did is once we started developing it, we could see that it could scale too. So while the developers were doing that, I went back to the stakeholders and said, okay, you have a lot of categories here. You don't have much consistency on topics and the way you organize your research. So I set up a workshop to really work on their vocabulary and taxonomy of just their, you know, the raw materials of their research, so that we could develop a good information architecture of the site and do faceted search. That made sense not only to them, but to the people that they're reaching out to. Once we did that taxonomy exercise, we didn't put it in the site until we did a card sorting task with actual users. So what that is we put it online, all these different topics and categories, and had actual librarians come to this this program or site to organize how they saw those topics and categories. Once we had that data back, then we could tell the developers, okay, now we figured out how this is supposed to be chunked and categorized so that they could start building it. And that way it was scalable, and we were able to make sure that throughout the whole process we're getting some input from our users. So once we had that slice, we were able to start filling in the rest of the site. And one of the things, not only do we want to get librarians and other visitors to download their reports, but we also wanted people to sign up so that they would get news of, hey, the new report's coming out. So we experiment with different placements of where that sign up would be, and once we found the best place for it, based on a smaller set, then it's been released. Now we've gotten, I think it's gone up at least 20% as far as the last time I checked, because that
the number of signups has gone up by 20% since the previous version.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. So it has been a success, and it really shows just by moving something on a page can really have a huge effect on the design, and the sign up rate was amazing.
Well, let me ask you a couple more questions about that. So, so there were a lot of different activities happening at the same time. So you had software development happening, a number of different research activities. What kind of things were going on with trying to figure out, you know, what the site was going to look like, how things were going to be laid out, what was connected to what kind of things were you doing in parallel to kind of work out the design of the site itself?
So I tried to break down the navigation into two different I guess, categories. One was the persistent navigation, which is what you usually see at the top of every page. It's the global navigation, the big buckets. But what I spent a lot of time on with the stakeholders was the contextual navigation. How is each object related to another? So an object could be an article, another object could be an event that they're hosting, and another object could be the person that's either writing the paper or putting on the event. So that way I had all these modules that could be interrelated, so that when you're on a page and you're on an article, you know who wrote it and if there's an event coming up. And they also can point to, oh, this article relates to this product that they have, or this kind of consulting practice that they do. So that way, no matter when you're on the site, you're always going to another related event or even another related article. So you're kind of, instead of just going there, grabbing the paper and leaving, you're I set it up so you can explore. So you don't have to go up to the main navigation as an escape hatch or to do the exploration. It's more in context exploration, if you will. So I spent a lot of time doing that to make sure that people were staying on the site and learning as much as they can, and satisfying the user's needs of getting those papers, but also trying to help the business objective of, hey, let's get these people working with us and partnering with us. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And so were you doing this through, I'm just trying to envision, like how this happens, right? So are you sketching? Are you making mock-ups in, a graphics program? Are you building, interactive versions of it? And how are you working through this, right? It's a complicated thing you're trying to do here with this contextual navigation. So, how do you kind of go from, I think this would be a cool idea to this is the right way to do it?
Well, I got a big piece of foam core,
and
I got a bunch of sticky notes. And what I did and the reason I put it on foam core is I wanted to work collaboratively with one of the developers to say, okay, this is what I'm thinking. And then I also wanted to work with a stakeholder that was living she was either in New York at the time or one of the Carolinas at the time. So what we did is we put one computer on the board, and we moved sticky notes around, right? Like I kind of seeded it and say, hey, this is how I'm envisioning it. But since she's the marketing director, she's responsible for a lot of the content, a lot of the editorial workflows. All the research goes through her and then gets populated on the site. So she really had, she was like a subject matter expert on what's happening in the organization. So, and then I've got the developer there just watching and seeing this because he's starting to estimate how much this is development time it's going to be, and if the platform we're putting on, I think we started with a WordPress site. We wanted to make sure that it was feasible. So that way, because it was sticky notes, it was never set in stone, and no one thought like, oh, if it's in a spreadsheet, it's it's locked in. It's like, no, it's not locked in. Let's do a collaborative exercise where we're moving sticky notes around. That was mobile, so I could move it to a different office. I could take a picture of it and send it to other people to kind of get
mobile, because you could just take the foam core. And,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I could move it around, and then once I had those modules and objects kind of figured out, I then went into a wireframing, vector-based OmniGraffle, and started laying out how these things would look on a page, but also how they would interact and how they were sewn together. Once I had that, I made it a clickable prototype, not for users. That would have been great if we had that kind of resource and timing, but we felt we did a good enough job in the strategy phase. We felt this was good. It was really just to show the stakeholders, hey, this is how we're now envisioning your site. So they kind of had a preview before we got into look and feel. Because at the same time, our visual designer hired a photographer to get some shots so that wasn't stock photography, was something that was more in line with their brand, because she also wanted to kind of re-envision the brand. So she was she was thinking about different concepts of color and how that color would work on the site without taking too much attention away from the articles. So kind of like I'm doing the interaction design while she's kind of doing the visual and emotional design at the same time. And we're collaborating to say, okay, this is what I'm thinking here, and she's saying, okay, this is what I'm thinking here. And then we're presenting that. What was really great is in previous, engagements when I wasn't inside and I was at agencies, it was like we saw the client every once in a while, and we would have these big deliverable dates. Where here, we said we want to meet with you at least every other week to show you our progress. We're never going to be, these are never done states. We're not having you sign off on it. We just want to show you what we're working on and have you collaborate with us. And I felt that was a really successful way to do it, but not, I think that's a best case scenario. You don't always have these high level directors of companies that you can talk to twice a week. Or I'm sorry, every other week.
Right. So, but that's very interesting. So you're thinking very much about creating these artifacts that will facilitate certain types of communication, right? Communication with the subject matter expert, trying to make sure that you get it right. Communication with the stakeholder to show progress, and also thinking about what kind of communication you want to have. So it sounds like you separate out conversations about the interaction design from conversations about the look and feel and the typography and the specific images and the colors and things like that, so that you can have these kind of focused conversations.
That's exactly right. I tried to make sure that I wasn't painting us in any kind of corner and allowing the stakeholders to have their say, but at the same time not having people get hung up on, you know, I don't really like the font or the colors that are happening here, and they're not paying attention to the interaction design or some of the content strategy. So we really did have to divorce certain things and present certain, like, kind of slowly reveal things to people so we could get the right conversation or the right kind of feedback. So, and sometimes a sticky note and, you know, some crude drawings are just enough, just to set the direction.
To keep it focused on that particular topic right there and not get distracted by these other things. So it sounds like this story has a happy ending. You talked about it, the product, it sounds like, was released. You have some data that it's been successful in some ways. And so congratulations on that.
Thank you, yes.
Excellent. So I know that before joining Ithaca, how long have you been at Ithaca?
3.5 years.
About 3.5 years. But I know from talking to you previously that you've done a bunch of other things as well.
Right.
So I think it'd be great to just hear about you know, what your career has been like, and what, you know, how you got where you are right now.
Okay. Well, I guess we can go back just before I went to graduate school. I was a photographer, and I was in a research hospital, and we had a lab that was half chemical processes and half digital processes, because this was the 1900s, so 1990s. We were still doing a lot with film and chemicals. But I saw that the digital mediums and computers, and especially with the beginning of the internet or the web, photography was changing really fast, and it was becoming more digital. That's when I decided to go to graduate school for human-computer interaction at the School for Information. So while I was there, during the summer, I got an internship at an agency actually doing what they called usability engineering, which was user research and doing design work. And I worked with visual designers and front-end developers. This was the year 2000, so during that time, the dot-com bubble burst, so the internship that I was hoping was going to lead into full-time employment was gone. So once I graduated from the School of Information, I went to Wayne State University to become a digital librarian. So at my time at Wayne State, it was a wonderful time because we had a grant called the 21st Century Librarian. So we had money to do special projects and fund graduate students to do the work. And some of that work was working with the Detroit News photo morgue. So we had images going back from the 1800s up until about 1980. We're digitizing all of those images and associating metadata with those, and then putting them online for access. The other fun project was working for the Detroit Historical Museum and looking at their toy collection, primarily toys from the early 1900s that were wind-up toys, and putting those online to show people how they work. We actually got a lot of traffic from industrial designers that saw that and kind of used that as inspiration for their work. While I was a digital librarian, I wasn't really doing too much UX work. I was mainly working with professors or different libraries or different archives and my graduate students, which was a blast. But I also really liked to do design, user experience design. So I did some freelance for some agencies. And then one day, one of the agencies that I did work for, offered me full-time employment, so I started to go down that road. Okay. It was a very large agency, so I kind of it was cool because it was a print agency that was trying to figure out how to do digital. So I felt it was a cool kind of time of flux. But as things kind of progressed, I realized that I don't want to be at a huge agency, especially an old school agency. I kind of want to be at more of a startup feel.
And an agency, just to be clear, is a company that sort of does projects for external clients. Exactly. So you would be doing, you might have a retailer one day and a manufacturer the next day, and a taxi company the other day, and you're doing different. I mean, I'm making this up, but you're doing. You're getting to do a lot of different types of projects and design work.
Absolutely, and that's what was so fun. Is I usually had two concurrent projects happening. One would be for like a wireless cell phone company and trying to figure out, how they're going to sell those products. And then the other thing might be doing a pitch for some kind of weird branding thing that we're going to do like in the physical space, and how does that physical space relate to something that's going to be on the web. So it was always, one thing was inspiring the other, and it was always like really fast design work, Worked with a lot of cool people, but it was pretty. I'm not going to say it wasn't stressful. It was a lot of work all the time.
Yeah.
Especially at a big agency, you always have these huge clients. I mean, the government, you know, you got the Navy, the United States Postal Service, and then healthcare. We worked in a lot of different verticals. So financial services, healthcare, e-commerce. So you never know where you're going to be, but you learn a ton all at once. But like I said, I wanted to go to a smaller agency that was more of a startup, and found one where it was they really understood digital. They actually just were only digital. They had never done print or anything like that. But while I was there, that's where I really got my e-commerce chops, because we had a user research team and a user experience design team. So what would happen is we had our own usability lab in-house. So when people were going through the e-commerce experience, shopping, and then going through the shopping cart, we were able to optimize every step of the way. And while we were studying and testing that, we could, between participants, between users, we could actually change the interface and tweak it so that we could really start dialing it in and get some of those gotchas out right away, and then start to validate that design as we went through.
Okay, so very tight integration between research and design.
Yes. Yeah. Though they were, you know, we had separate disciplines, because before I was kind of like, I was my own researcher. I would have to go to, or I wouldn't be able to do the recruiting. I would farm that out, but I would be running my test. I would be creating the test, etc., which could have some ethical implications as far as, am I objective when I'm testing my own designs? Right. So it was good to have, you know, someone that was like, okay, I have no skin in this game. Right. I'm just going to test it for you. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. And where I'm at now, we actually have a user research team that does, you know, goes out there, does observations, does ethnographic research, but also we have a usability lab here at Ithaca. So it's still, we kind of keep it separate, yet we're tightly integrated. I meet with them probably every other week so that they stay ahead of my recruiting needs or testing design needs.
So I'm going to ask you for one kind of parting thought, which is for folks that are just starting out, you know, maybe just looking at UX as something that they're thinking about getting into, maybe thinking about, you know, moving towards a career. Do you have any advice?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Look at everything in your environment and try to think about why it's there and its purpose. So I have a child, and it's great to look at his toys to think about, okay, what is its purpose? Does it communicate that purpose, and do I like it? And so it really helps you influence of how you can think about an experience. Like this glass, for instance, it has a purpose of, you know, it has to be a vessel to carry some water, right? But there's a lot of things you can do to it. You can add color to it. You can have different shapes. But, you know, for instance, it's not a bigger vessel because you got to hold it with your hand. So it's kind of like, think about that when you're thinking about your phone. You have to use it with your hand, and there's a certain amount of interaction with it and experience. So anyone that's kind of thinking about getting into experience design or something like that, it's fun to kind of just critique things around you, because then you can start thinking critically about design and why people create things. And then it really helps you influence when you're in the digital realm. You can kind of do anything you want when you're not in the physical realm. So I like to kind of juxtapose those things together.
Excellent. Yeah, so kind of taking a designer eye view of the world is something that you can just do throughout your entire life.
Right, exactly. Excellent. And try to focus on the positive things and the things that make you feel good, because a lot of times, I mean, I could critique a ton of things that make me frustrated. And a lot of times that's what, you know, a lot of users feel that too. It's like, I'm so frustrated, we've got to make this better. So
find some positive examples.
Exactly.
Too. Excellent.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. This has been great, and I really appreciate you taking your time to chat with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.